Tonight, we step through the paper screens into a world of silk, discipline, and whispered secrets. We explore the life of a figure wrapped in layers of misunderstanding and mystique, an artist whose canvas was conversation and whose life was a performance, the geisha, before you settle in. If you enjoy these journeys into the past, please consider subscribing to Medieval Nocturnes. Your support allows us to continue creating this quiet space for history. Now, find a comfortable position. Let the world outside fade away, and allow the soft hum of the air to be your only companion as we begin. You are born in the Gion district of Kyoto, a place of wooden houses, narrow lanes, and the faint, ever-present scent of incense and damp stone. It is the late Edo period, a time of shoguns, samurai, and a rigid social order that has already decided your path. You are 5 years old. You still chase dragonflies in the garden and believe the moon follows you home. You have no idea that your parents, burdened by debt and another mouth to feed, have made a choice that will seal your fate forever. One crisp autumn morning, you are dressed in your finest kimono, a garment of stiff, patterned silk that feels both beautiful and suffocating. Your mother combs your hair with a gentleness that feels like a farewell. You are told you are going on a special visit, a great honor. You walk hand in hand with your father through the bustling streets, past vendors selling pickled vegetables and merchants shouting their wares, your small wooden sandals making a soft clacking sound on the cobblestones. The world feels vibrant and alive, entirely unaware that yours is about to shrink to the size of a single house. You arrive at a tall, immaculate wooden building with a tiled roof and latticed windows covered by delicate rice paper. This is the Okiya, the geisha house. It doesn't look like a home. It feels like a temple dedicated to silence and order. Your father slides open the heavy door, and you step from the bright, noisy street into a world of cool shadows, polished dark wood, and the faint scent of camellia oil and old silk. The air inside is still and heavy with unspoken rules. A woman emerges from the shadows. She is the Okazan, the mother of the house. Her face is a mask of serene authority, her movements precise and economical. She looks at you not as a child, but as an investment, her eyes assessing your posture, your features, your potential worth. You try to offer a small, shy smile, but it finds no purchase on her placid expression. She doesn't smile back. Your parents bow so low their foreheads nearly touch the floor, murmuring words of respect and gratitude. The exchange is brief, formal, and devastatingly final. Your father places a hand on your shoulder, gives it a gentle squeeze, and then they are gone. The door slides shut, muffling the sounds of the world you once knew. You have not been adopted. You have been sold. You are now a piece of the Okiya's property, a promise of future earnings, a life indentured to the house in exchange for the cost of your training, your food, and the very kimono on your back. You are now a shikomi, the lowest of the low, a maiden training. Your only job is to obey, to observe, and to become invisible. The other women and girls of the house drift past you like apparitions. Their faces are painted a flawless porcelain white. Their movements are a study in impossible grace, and their gaze slides over you as if you are nothing more than a piece of furniture. You stand alone in the entryway, a small girl in an oversized silence, and understand that your childhood has just ended. The geisha you see are not just women. They are living works of art, gliding through the corridors in a rustle of silk. Their hair is a sculpted masterpiece of black lacquer and intricate ornaments. Their steps so light they barely disturb the air. Their conversations are a quiet murmur, a language of nuance and suggestion you cannot yet comprehend. To you, they are mesmerizing and terrifying, beings from another world, and you are here to serve them, to scrub the floors they walk on, and to hope that one day you might earn the right to exist in their world. Your new life begins before the sun. You are woken not by a gentle touch, but by the cold that seeps through the floorboards and the distant sound of a temple bell. You sleep on a thin futon in a small shared room with the other junior girls, or sometimes even in a hallway. The space is cramped, the blankets are thin, and the dreams of your old home, the smell of your mother's cooking, the warmth of your own bed, fade the moment you open your eyes to the disciplined silence of the okia. Your days are a long, unbroken chain of chores. You learn to sweep the delicate tatami mat floors with a soft broom, using precise, overlapping strokes that leave no dust behind. You stoke the charcoal fires, your small hands becoming chapped and raw from the constant work. You haul buckets of water from the well to fill the baths, your shoulders aching under the weight of the wooden yoke. Every task is a lesson in endurance, performed without complaint, because complaint is a luxury you cannot afford. Meals are a stark reminder of your place in the hierarchy. You eat last, after the geisha and senior apprentices have finished. Your portion is whatever remains, a small bowl of rice, a few pickled vegetables, perhaps a sliver of fish. You eat quickly and silently, your eyes downcast. Hunger is a constant, quiet companion, a dull ache that sharpens your senses and reminds you that everything you receive here is a debt. Every grain of rice you eat adds to the sum you owe the house. You are taught, through sharp glances and subtle gestures, the art of being invisible. A shikomi must move through the house like a shadow, silent and unobtrusive. Your footsteps must be soft, your voice unheard unless you are spoken to. You learn to anticipate needs before they are voiced. A fan placed just so, a cup of tea appearing at the right moment, a pair of sandals perfectly aligned at the door. To be noticed is to have failed, to have made a noise, to have been clumsy, to have existed too loudly. Your education is one of osmosis and imitation. There are no classrooms, no gentle instructors. You learn by watching, by absorbing every detail with a desperate focus. You watch how a senior geisha folds a priceless silk kimono, a dozen intricate folds executed in a fluid, hypnotic sequence. You memorize the delicate, ritualized way she prepares and serves tea, the precise angle of the teapot's spout, the exact way she turns the cup before offering it. This is how knowledge is passed down, not through words, but through perfect, repeated action. Mistakes are met not with shouts, but with a quiet, piercing shame that is far more effective. If you spill a drop of water, you are scolded for your carelessness, and the cost is added to your debt. If you tear a paper screen, the disappointment in the okusan's eyes feels like a physical blow. You learn that a geisha's world is built on a foundation of absolute precision. Every gesture has meaning, every object has its place, and every error is a crack in the perfect facade you are all meant to uphold. Yet, in the midst of the endless scrubbing and fetching, you catch moments of breathtaking beauty that make it all seem bearable. You might pause in a hallway to watch an older Mako, an apprentice geisha, practicing a dance, her fan fluttering like a trapped butterfly. Or you might hear the melancholy, resonant notes of a shamisen being played by a master, the music telling a story of sorrow and grace. In these moments, you see the goal. This is not just servitude, it is the brutal, forging fire of an artist's training. As night falls, your work continues. You help the geisha prepare for their evening appointments, fetching their cosmetics, helping with the complex layers of their kimono, and running last-minute errands. Your day only ends when the last geisha has returned. Long after midnight, you clean up, prepare the house for the morning, and finally collapse onto your futon. Your body a landscape of aches. You fall asleep instantly, not dreaming, only gathering strength for the moment the temple bell rings and it begins all over again. After what feels like a lifetime of scrubbing floors and existing in the periphery, the Okusan finally decides you are ready. Not for the beautiful dances or the soulful music you long for, but for the true foundation of a geisha's art, the discipline of the body. You will now learn not how to perform, but how to simply be. Your first lesson is in the art of sitting, and it is a lesson in pain. You are taught to kneel in Caesar, the formal sitting position. Your legs are folded neatly beneath you, your weight resting on your heels, your back held perfectly straight. For the first minute, it is merely uncomfortable. After 3 minutes, your ankles begin to burn. After 5, your feet have fallen asleep and are staging a silent, agonizing rebellion of pins and needles. You are forbidden to shift, to wince, or to show any sign of distress. Grace, you learn, is the ability to suffer beautifully. This training is relentless. You spend hours kneeling, sometimes with a bowl of water balanced on your head or a piece of paper held between your knees to teach you stillness. Your entire lower body screams in protest, but your face must remain a portrait of placid composure. This is the first and most crucial lesson. A geisha's body is not her own. It is an instrument to be controlled, and its complaints are irrelevant to the performance. Next, you learn the intricate language of bowing. You thought you knew how to bow, but you soon discover there are dozens of variations, each with a precise meaning. There is the simple 15-degree nod of acknowledgement to a peer, the deep 45-degree bow of respect to a patron, and the profound floor-grazing bow of apology. Each must be held for a specific count. Your back straight, your hands placed correctly, your gaze directed at the proper spot on the floor. It is a form of communication more complex than any words. You practice these bows until your spine aches and your muscles tremble with fatigue. A senior geisha watches you, her eyes missing nothing. A tap from her closed fan on your back corrects a slouch. A quiet, disappointed sigh tells you that your timing was off by half a second. You repeat the motions again and again, the humiliation of imperfection a far sharper sting than the physical strain. You are not just learning a gesture. You are engraving respect and humility into your very posture. Then, you must relearn how to walk. Your natural, childish stride is erased and replaced with suriashi, a gliding shuffle where the soles of your feet barely leave the floor. Wearing white tabi socks, you practice on the polished wooden floors of the okiya, trying to move from one end of a long corridor to the other without making a single sound. It feels unnatural and awkward. A constrained movement that forces you to engage your core and control every tiny shift in your balance. Through this crucible of physical discipline, something begins to change without realizing it. You start to carry yourself differently. Your movements become quieter, more deliberate. Your posture is straighter, your head held higher. You are learning to inhabit your body with an awareness you never knew was possible. You are being broken down, your natural impulses and habits sanded away through sheer, painful repetition. This is the hidden curriculum of the Okina. Before you can be an artist, you must first become a vessel. You are learning that every part of you, the way you sit, the way you walk, the way you bow, is a part of the performance. You are not being taught a skill, you are being remade. The child you were is slowly being erased to make way for the graceful, controlled, and unreadable woman you are destined to become. Years pass in a blur of disciplined pain and quiet observation. You have mastered the art of kneeling without flinching, walking without sound, and bowing with perfect humility. Finally, the day comes. The Okasan summons you and, with a brief, momentous nod, informs you that you are ready. You are to become a Mako, an apprentice geisha. A wave of terror and exhilaration washes over you. You are about to step out of the shadows and into the light. But that light comes with the crushing weight of expectation. Your life as an invisible servant is over. Your life as a visible work of art is about to begin. Your transformation starts with your hair. Professional stylists, masters of their craft, arrive at the Okiya for hours. They pull, twist, and shape your own hair into the elaborate Nihongami style. Hot wax is applied to hold it in place, followed by lacquer and a dizzying array of pins, combs, and delicate dangling ornaments called kanzashi. The result is a heavy sculptural masterpiece that sits atop your head like a fragile crown. It is beautiful, and it is a prison. This hairstyle must last for a week, and preserving it will become your new obsession. That night, you are introduced to your new sleeping companion, the Takamakura. It is not a pillow, but a small, hard wooden block with a padded cradle for your neck. You must sleep with your neck resting on this device, your head elevated so that your immaculate hairstyle never touches the futon. The first night is torture. Every time you begin to drift off, your head slips and you wake with a jolt of panic. Sleep is no longer a rest, but a new and demanding discipline. Next comes the face. You sit before a mirror as a senior geisha begins the ritual of applying your makeup. First, a thick, waxy oil is massaged onto your skin. Then, a white paste called oshiroi, made from rice powder, is mixed with water and carefully painted onto your face, neck, and upper back. It feels cold and heavy, sealing your pores and transforming your skin into a flawless, inhuman canvas. At the nape of your neck, 2 or 3 unpainted stripes of skin, a pattern called ariashi, are left exposed, a subtle, intimate suggestion of the real person beneath the mask. The details are painted with the precision of a calligrapher. Your own eyebrows are flattened with wax, and new, serene arches are drawn higher on your forehead with charcoal. A delicate trace of red and black pigment lines your eyes, making them appear wider and more expressive. Finally, your lips, as a new Mako. Only your bottom lip is painted a vivid crimson, a traditional sign of apprenticeship. It is a small, perfect bow, a symbol of idealized, demure beauty. Then comes the kimono. You are encased in layers of exquisite, heavy silk. The kimono for a Mako is far more vibrant and ostentatious than that of a full geisha, with long swinging sleeves and a wide trailing sash, or obi, that is tied in an elaborate knot at your back. It weighs more than you could have imagined, restricting your movement and forcing you to maintain a perfect, upright posture. Getting dressed is a complex ritual that requires a professional dresser to wrap, fold, and tie the fabric around you until you are a prisoner in a cocoon of silk. When it is all done, you are led to a full-length mirror. The person staring back is a stranger. She is a doll, a porcelain icon, a creature of breathtaking and unsettling beauty. Your own face is gone, hidden beneath the white mask and the painted lips. You see not a girl, but a symbol of the flower and willow world. You have been successfully erased and rebuilt. You are no longer you. You are a Mako. You are now a walking piece of art, a beautiful ornament designed to delight and entertain. But your job is still to watch, to listen, and to learn. You will accompany senior geisha to tea houses and banquets, a silent, beautiful accessory. You will pour sake, smile demurely, and absorb every nuance of conversation, every gesture, every subtle interaction. The pressure is immense, for you are now on public display, and any mistake will bring shame not just upon you, but upon your entire okia. Now that you are a walking embodiment of tradition, your formal artistic training begins. The foundation of discipline has been laid. Now, you must build the beautiful structure of performance upon it. Your days are no longer filled with household chores, but with lessons that will push your mind and body in new, demanding ways. You will learn to command a room, not with authority, but with art. Your first instrument of this new trade is the shamisen, a three-stringed lute with a long, slender neck and a body covered in taut skin. In your hands, it feels awkward and foreign. The large plectrum, or bachi, is clumsy, and the first sounds you produce are a series of jarring, unpleasant twangs. The music you are meant to create is one of soulful melancholy and subtle grace, but your initial attempts sound more like a lament for a dying animal. Your teachers are masters of their art and merciless in their instruction. They are often older, retired geisha who communicate more through sighs of disappointment than words of encouragement. You practice for hours each day, your fingers developing deep, painful calluses until they become hard and unfeeling. You repeat the same simple melodies until they are etched into your muscle memory. A single misplaced note is met with a sharp rap of a fan on your knuckles, or in order to start again from the beginning. Simultaneously, you begin to study dance. This is not a dance of wild, expressive leaps, but of slow, deliberate, and deeply symbolic movements, known as mai. It is a storytelling art that relies on immense control and subtlety. You learn to use a fan not as a prop, but as an extension of your arm, transforming it into a fluttering bird, a gentle rain, or a rising moon. Every gesture, the tilt of your head, the turn of your wrist, the placement of your feet, is precise and imbued with centuries of meaning. The physical toll is immense. Holding a single pose for several minutes, your knees bent and your back straight, requires a core strength that leaves your muscles burning. You practice in the heavy, restrictive kimono, learning to move with a grace that seems to defy the sheer weight of the fabric. The goal is to make it look effortless, to create an illusion of floating, fluid motion while your body strains beneath the silk. Yet, Perhaps the most difficult art you must master has no instrument and no set choreography, the art of conversation. You are taught to be a brilliant listener, to make even the dullest man feel like the most fascinating person in the room. You learn to flatter with subtlety, to deflect unwanted advances with a graceful turn of phrase, and to guide a conversation as skillfully as a boatman navigating a river. You must be charming, witty, and always agreeable. Your education becomes a whirlwind of cultural knowledge. You must memorize hundreds of classical poems, be familiar with famous works of literature and art, and stay informed on topics ranging from local politics to the latest kabuki plays. You are being trained to be more than just an entertainer. You are becoming a companion, a woman whose company is sought after not just for her beauty, but for her intellect, her wit, and her refined taste. You begin to understand that a geisha's power lies in this delicate synthesis. It is the ability to perform a heart-wrenching song on the shamisen, then seamlessly pivot to a light-hearted discussion about the season's first cherry blossoms. You are learning to be a master of mood, an architect of atmosphere. Your tools are not just your fan and your instrument, but your words, your smile, and the deep well of knowledge you are tirelessly building within yourself. The day of your formal debut, your misadashi, arrives with all the weight and ceremony of a royal coronation. It is a public declaration to the entire district that a new Mako has joined the flower and willow world. The rituals begin at dawn, with blessings, prayers, and the final, meticulous application of your makeup and kimono. Today, you are not just an apprentice. You are a living symbol of tradition, and the entire community is watching. Dressed in your most splendid kimono and wearing towering wooden sandals called okubo, you are led through the narrow streets of Gion. The okubo are heavy and precarious, forcing you into a slow, careful, gliding walk. Their hollow insides make a distinctive, melodic clacking sound on the stone pavement, announcing your arrival. Shopkeepers and townspeople pause to watch you pass, their faces a mixture of curiosity and reverence. You are no longer an anonymous girl. You are a rare and beautiful sight, a new flower blossoming in their midst. A crucial part of your debut is the establishment of a bond with an onsen or older sister. She is a senior geisha from your okia who will act as your mentor, guide, and protector in a formal ceremony involving the ritual sharing of sake. You are bound to her. From this day forward, you will follow her to appointments, learn from her example, and benefit from her connections. Her reputation is now linked to yours, and she has a vested interest in ensuring you succeed. That evening, your onsen leads you into an ochaya, a tea house, for your first official engagement. You step into a world of warm, glowing paper lanterns, the low murmur of men's laughter, and the scent of expensive sake and grilled delicacies. The air is thick with an atmosphere of refined leisure. In one room, you hear the delicate notes of a koto being played. In another, the boisterous sounds of a drinking game. This is the stage upon which you will now perform every night. As the junior Mako, your role is carefully prescribed. You are not expected to be a witty conversationalist or a master musician yet. Your primary duty is to be an exquisite, attentive ornament. You kneel gracefully to pour sake for the guests, ensuring their cups are never empty. You smile, you nod, and you listen with an intensity that borders on reverence as your onsen masterfully steers the conversation, charming the patrons with her wit and grace. The clients are men of power and influence, wealthy merchants, high-ranking samurai, and celebrated artists. They have come to the tea house to escape the rigid constraints of their public lives. They are not seeking simple pleasure, but an evening of sophisticated entertainment, an illusion of effortless perfection where the conversation is sparkling, the company is beautiful, and the troubles of the outside world cease to exist. They pay a fortune for this privilege, and they expect nothing less than perfection. You learn more in that one night than in months of practice. You watch how your onsen deflects a slightly too personal question with a clever poem, how she subtly includes a shy guest in the conversation, and how she makes every man at the table feel as though he is the sole focus of her attention. It is a masterful performance of social intelligence, a delicate dance of flattery, wit, and carefully maintained distance. When you finally return to the okia late that night, you are bone-weary. Your knees ache from hours of kneeling. Your cheeks are sore from holding a serene smile, and your mind is a whirlwind of names, faces, and unspoken rules. It was a terrifying ordeal, a trial by fire where every gesture was scrutinized, but you did not spill the sake. You did not speak out of turn. You did not bring shame to your house, and in your new world, that is a profound victory. As you spend more time in the tea houses, you become acutely aware of a persistent misunderstanding that follows you like a shadow, particularly among those unfamiliar with your world. You learn that many mistake art for invitation and performance for availability. It is here you must master one of the most vital skills of your profession, reinforcing the boundary between a geisha and a courtesan, a line as clear as day to you, but often blurred in the minds of others. The distinction is simple, yet profound. A courtesan, or oiran, sells physical intimacy. Her world is one of sensual pleasure. A geisha sells art. She is a master of music, dance, and conversation. The visual cues are just as clear. A courtesan's elaborate obius tied in the front for practicality, while a geisha's is always tied in the back, a complex knot that would be impossible to retie alone. Your value is not in your body, but in your skill and refinement. However, not every guest respects this distinction. You quickly learn that your most important art form is the ability to say no without ever speaking the word. Bluntness is considered unrefined and offensive. Instead, you are trained in a kind of conversational martial art, a linguistic aikido where you redirect a man's forwardness with such grace that he barely notices he has been rebuffed. A suggestive comment is met with a light, tinkling laugh and a sudden fascinated question about the poetry on a nearby scroll. This skill is your shield. An invitation to a private meeting is met with a regretful smile and the lament, "Oh, what a shame, my schedule is so terribly full." A statement that remains true even if your calendar is empty. You learn to wield compliments as weapons of deflection. "You are too kind to an unworthy girl like me," you might say, lowering your eyes demurely, a gesture of humility that masterfully shuts down the advance while flattering the man's ego. In this world of elegant transactions, you learn about the concept of the dana. A dana is a wealthy patron, a man who agrees to sponsor you, covering the astronomical costs of your kimonos, training, and living expenses. This is not a relationship of romance, but one of patronage. It is a formal, often lifelong commitment that provides you with financial security and a higher status within the geisha community. In return for his patronage, Adana receives your loyalty and priority for his engagements. He is your primary client, your sponsor. The nature of the relationship can be complex and is rarely spoken of aloud. For some, it is a deep, platonic bond built on mutual respect for the arts. For others, the unspoken expectation of intimacy might exist. It is a gray area, one you must navigate with the same poise and control you bring to every other aspect of your life. You do not choose your dana. The arrangement is negotiated between the man and the occasion of your house. A business transaction discussed over tea and polite conversation. You are simply informed that a powerful patron has taken an interest in you, and you are expected to be grateful. He may be a kind, elderly gentleman who genuinely appreciates your music, or he may be a crass merchant you find repulsive. It does not matter. You must be charming. And so, you build another layer of armor. You perfect the art of projecting genuine affection and rapt attention while keeping your true feelings locked away. This emotional labor is the most draining part of your existence. It is a constant, silent performance within the larger performance. A tightrope walk of maintaining your dignity and ensuring your survival in a world funded by the desires and egos of powerful men. From the outside, the Okia appears to be a sanctuary of feminine grace and artistic collaboration. To the patrons and the public, it is a harmonious house of sisters, all dedicated to the preservation of beauty. But you live inside its walls, and you know the truth. The Okia is a gilded cage, and within it exists a silent, fiercely competitive world where status is everything and rivalries are as sharp and delicate as a shard of ice. This is a house filled with intelligent, ambitious, and highly disciplined women who are all vying for the same limited resources, the most generous patrons, the finest silk kimonos, and the favor of the Okasan. Open conflict is forbidden, as it would disrupt the harmony, the wa, that is central to your world. So, the battles are fought, not with raised voices, but with whispers, glances, and gestures so subtle they are invisible to the untrained eye. The weapons in this silent war are devastatingly effective. A compliment can be expertly crafted to deliver an insult. Your performance was so energetic tonight, sister, a senior might say, implying your dance lacked the requisite subtlety and control. A strategically placed rumor, whispered to the right patron at the right time, can tarnish a rival's reputation for weeks. An invitation to an important party might be accidentally forgotten, leaving a competitor out in the cold. You learn to read the currents of the house, to understand the shifting alliances and the unspoken tensions. Jealousy is a powerful force. If you become a favorite among the patrons, you will feel its sting. A priceless hair ornament, a kansashi, might mysteriously go missing just before an important engagement. A drop of soy sauce might accidentally be spilled on your new obi. You learn quickly to be impeccably careful, to guard your possessions, and to trust no one completely. The hierarchy of the house is absolute. The Okasan is the unquestioned matriarch. Her word is law. Full-fledged geisha, now called Gaiko in the Kyoto dialect, command the most respect. They have seniority over the Meiko, who in turn have authority over the junior apprentices and the shikomi. Your position on this ladder dictates the size of your room, the quality of your meals, and the deference you are shown. Rising through the ranks is your only path to comfort and security. Your greatest ally in this intricate political landscape is your Onzen. Her guidance is invaluable, and her protection shields you from the worst of the house's jealousies. She teaches you which patrons to avoid, which rivals to be wary of, and how to navigate the Okasan's moods. But you are also aware that this bond, while often genuinely affectionate, is also one of professional necessity. One day, you will be a full Geiko, and you may find yourself competing with the very woman who trained you to survive. You cultivate an impenetrable facade of serene politeness. You master the art of the neutral smile, the non-committal answer, and the gracious compliment that reveals nothing of your true feelings. You learn to listen more than you speak, to observe everything and react to nothing. In the beautiful, treacherous world of the Okia, you quickly understand that composure is not just an aesthetic choice. It is your most essential armor. Your public performance in the tea house is demanding, but the private performance within the Okia requires a different kind of endurance. It is a constant game of strategy, diplomacy, and emotional control. Here, behind the paper screens, and away from the admiring eyes of clients, the discipline you have learned is tested not by dance or music, but by the quiet, relentless pressure of living among your rivals. Years of apprenticeship flow by like a river of silk. You have spent countless nights in the tea houses, pouring sake, mastering your shamisen, and perfecting the art of charming conversation. You are no longer the nervous, silent girl who debuted years ago. You are a seasoned performer, your movements fluid, your wit sharp, and now, around the age of 20, the Okia decides you are ready to take the final step. You are to become a full-fledged geisha, or, as they are known in the Gion district, a Geiko. The ceremony that marks this transition is called Arake, which translates to the turning of the collar. It is a subtle but deeply significant rite of passage, symbolizing your graduation from apprentice to master. For the final days of your life as a Meiko, you perform ceremonies and rituals, bidding farewell to the tea houses and patrons who knew you as an apprentice. It is a time of both celebration and nostalgia for the girl you are about to leave behind. The name of the ceremony is literal. As a Meiko, the undercollar of your kimono, the eri, has been a rich, decorative red, a symbol of youth and apprenticeship. During the Arake ritual, this is replaced with a simple, solid white collar. This small change signifies everything. You are no longer a girl, but a woman. Your appeal is no longer based on youthful charm, but on mature sophistication and artistic mastery. Your entire appearance transforms to reflect this new status. The flamboyant, brightly colored kimonos with long, sweeping sleeves are retired. You now wear garments of more subdued hues and elegant patterns, with shorter sleeves that allow for more graceful, less dramatic movements. The wide, trailing obi of a Meiko is replaced with the shorter, more refined knot of a Geiko. Your beauty is no longer meant to be dazzling and overt, but understated and profound. One of the most significant changes, and a source of immense personal relief, is your hair. You are finally freed from the weekly ordeal of having your own hair styled and the nightly torture of the takamakura. You will now wear a wig, or katsura, intricately styled and exquisitely crafted. Though the wig is heavy and can be uncomfortable, it grants you a freedom you haven't known in years, the simple, profound luxury of sleeping on a normal pillow. Your makeup also evolves. While you still wear the iconic white oshiroi for very formal events, it is applied with more subtlety. Crucially, you now paint both your upper and lower lips, a clear sign of your status as a Geiko. For many daily engagements, you may even wear much lighter, more natural makeup, a sign that your reputation now rests on your established artistic skill rather than a doll-like, idealized appearance. With this new status comes a world of new responsibilities. You are no longer an assistant. You are the main event. You are expected to carry an evening's entertainment on your own, to perform complex musical solos, and to engage patrons with worldly, intelligent conversation. You may soon be asked to become an onzen yourself, taking a young Mako under your wing and passing on the traditions that were so rigorously ingrained in you. You are now a respected artist. You earn a real wage for your time, although a large portion of it immediately goes back to the Okia to continue paying the monumental debt you have accumulated over your years of training. You have more autonomy, more say in your schedule, but you are still bound by a web of obligations. You have reached the pinnacle of your profession, but you know that the performance is far from over. It has simply entered its most demanding and respected act. As a Geiko, your life settles into a rhythm of profound discipline and nightly performance. The frantic, desperate learning of your Mako years has been replaced by the quiet confidence of a master. Your hands no longer tremble when you pick up the shamisen. They move with an ingrained certainty, drawing out notes that are not just technically perfect, but rich with emotion and experience. The art is no longer something you are striving to learn. It is a part of you, as natural and necessary as breathing. You have learned that the greatest power lies not in what you do, but in what you withhold. As a Mako, you chattered endlessly to fill the silences. As a Geiko, you command them. You learn that a single, deliberate pause before answering a question can be more impactful than 1,000 clever words. A knowing, unreadable smile, or the sharp, definitive snap of your fan closing can shift the entire mood of a room. Your presence alone has become an instrument. In the tea house, you are no longer a follower, but a leader. You are the conductor of the evening's symphony. You deftly guide conversations, drawing out a shy guest, gently reining in a boisterous one, and ensuring the atmosphere remains one of refined, elegant enjoyment. You initiate games, suggest poems, and decide when to perform a dance or a song. The success of the entire party rests on your shoulders, and you carry the weight with an appearance of effortless ease that has taken a lifetime to perfect. Your name now has a life of its own. It is whispered with respect in the corridors of power and boasted about by the patrons who secure your company. This reputation is your most precious asset, a delicate treasure you must protect at all costs. A single off-key performance, an ill-judged joke, or a malicious rumor could unravel years of meticulous work. The pressure to be flawless, night after night, is immense. You now see the world from the other side of the mentorship bond. A young Mako is assigned to you as your Amuro, your younger sister. You look at her, nervous, eager to please, terrified of making a mistake. And you see a perfect reflection of your own past. You guide her with a firm but steady hand, correcting her posture, refining her conversation, and teaching her the unspoken rules of the tea house. You are now the guardian of the tradition, responsible for passing it on. Yet, even as you are constantly surrounded by patrons, apprentices, and your sisters in the Okia, a quiet loneliness pervades your life. You are admired, desired, and placed upon a pedestal. But you are rarely seen as the woman behind the white makeup. Your clients seek an escape, an idealized fantasy, and your role is to provide it. You can never truly be vulnerable, never show fatigue, sadness, or frustration. The perfect, serene Geiko is a role you play even when the paper screens are closed. You are now, in essence, a small business. You manage your demanding schedule, cultivate relationships with the most influential tea houses and patrons, and keep a mental ledger of your earnings as you work to pay off your debt to the Okia. You understand the delicate balance between art and commerce. Your charm is your currency, your talent is your trade, and your livelihood depends on your ability to remain in demand in a highly competitive world. Every evening, as you secure your wig and check your reflection, you are struck by the weight of your role. You are a living conduit of history. The songs you sing are centuries old. The dances you perform were created by women you will never know. You are not just an entertainer. You are a curator of a fragile and beautiful culture. You are no longer learning the tradition. You are the tradition, and your every performance is an act of keeping it alive. The seasons of your life turn, each one marked by the blooming of cherry blossoms and the falling of autumn leaves. Decades in the flower and willow world pass in a flurry of silk, music, and countless cups of sake. You are a celebrated Geiko, a master of your art, but the unyielding march of time applies even to you. The frantic pace of your youth softens, and the brilliant spotlight you once commanded begins to shift, naturally and inevitably, toward the younger faces, the newest flowers in the district. There is no grand retirement ceremony, no final bow before a curtain falls. A geisha's career does not end, it transforms. You are now faced with the unspoken question, what comes next? For many, the path forward is to become a teacher. You trade the tea house stage for the quiet practice rooms of the Okia. You are now the stern-faced master, your ear trained to detect the slightest imperfection in a student's shamisen melody. You pass on the art, the discipline, and the secrets of the trade, ensuring the chain of tradition remains unbroken. Another path is to become the Okisan of a geisha house, perhaps even the very Okia where you began. You trade your fan and instrument for account books and contracts. You are now the one who interviews hopeful young girls, assesses their potential with a practiced eye, and negotiates with patrons for the future of your house. The cycle becomes complete as you embody the formidable matriarch you once both feared and revered. Your life now dedicated to the business of art rather than the art itself. For a few, there is an exit, a quiet, respectable marriage, often to a long-standing and wealthy patron who has become a widower, offers a life of domestic security. This means leaving the world of geisha behind entirely, trading your artistic independence for the role of a wife. It is an exchange of one form of performance for another, a final, permanent departure from the community that has been your entire world. But many Geikos simply continue on their path, their performance growing quieter and more refined with age. You no longer entertain at loud, boisterous banquets. Instead, you are sought after for small, intimate gatherings where your wisdom, your experience, and your serene presence are the main attraction. Your conversation is now your primary art form, and your words, steeped in a lifetime of observation, carry a weight that no youthful dance can match. Your body remains a testament to your lifelong discipline. Your back is still impeccably straight, a permanent echo of your posture training. You can kneel in the formal seiza position for hours without a thought. Your hands, even when still, rest in positions of unconscious grace. The training is not a memory. It is written into your bones, your muscles, and your very way of being. You have become a living landmark in the district. Younger geisha, whisper your name with reverence, telling stories of your legendary beauty and skill. You are an institution, a cherished link to the past. You may not perform as often, your public appearances growing rarer, but your presence is still felt throughout the narrow streets of Gyan. There is no final farewell. One day you simply stop accepting appointments. Your name fades from the tea house booking lists, not with an announcement, but with a quiet, respectful absence. You recede from the stage into the esteemed shadows of legacy, a living memory still wrapped in silk, your life's work complete, your performance now a part of history. Now let us leave the world of the geisha and drift further back in time to the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Here, among the ancient Sumerians, who lived over 4,000 years ago, the concept of marriage was not born of moonlit poetry or romantic yearning. It was born of practicality, property, and the meticulous art of record-keeping. In Sumer, love was a welcome but optional bonus. The contract was mandatory. The Sumerians were the first known civilization to formalize marriage through written agreements. These were not penned on delicate paper, but pressed into damp clay tablets using a reed stylus, creating the distinctive wedge-shaped script known as cuneiform. These marriage contracts were not declarations of undying love. They were detailed, binding economic transactions, laying the foundation for a stable and orderly society. At the heart of the Sumerian marriage was the movement of property. The bride's family provided a dowry, a collection of assets that could include anything from livestock and textiles to land and servants. This was her contribution to the new household. In return, the groom's family often paid a bride price, a sum given to the bride's family as a form of compensation and a demonstration of the groom's ability to provide. The entire affair was less a union of hearts and more a merger of two family enterprises. These clay tablets were, in essence, the world's first prenuptial agreements. They spelled out, in clear and unromantic terms, what each party brought into the union. More importantly, they stipulated what would happen to these assets if the marriage were to dissolve. The contract detailed the penalties for adultery, the conditions for divorce, and how property would be divided, refunded, or repossessed. Your entire marital future could be audited from a single, baked piece of clay. Marriage was a cornerstone of social order. A wife was expected to be loyal and, above all, fertile. Her primary duty was to produce male heirs, to continue the family line and manage the household. A husband's duty was to provide for his family, protect his property, and uphold his family's honor. These roles were not suggestions. They were rigid expectations enforced by both social pressure and a strict legal code. The laws of the time were unforgiving. Adultery, especially on the part of the wife, was considered a grave crime against the husband's property rights and could be punished by death, often by being cast into the river. Divorce was permissible, but only for specific, legally recognized reasons, such as a wife's inability to bear children or a husband's gross neglect. Simply growing apart was not a valid reason to dissolve a contract. The wedding ceremony itself was likely a simple affair. devoid of the pageantry we associate with modern nuptials. A couple was considered married once the contract was finalized and they began living together. The true marker of the union was not a public declaration of love, but the community's recognition of the contract. For the Sumerians, marriage was a civic duty, a pragmatic necessity for the continuation of lineages, the protection of property, and the maintenance of a stable society. It was a partnership based on strategy and survival in a world where the annual flood of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers was a far more pressing concern than the fleeting whims of the human heart. We travel now from the Fertile Crescent to the banks of the Nile, where ancient Egyptian civilization flourished for millennia. Here, marriage was not merely a social contract, it was a mirror of the cosmos. The gods themselves were married, Isis to her beloved Osiris, the sky goddess, Nut to the earth god, Geb. Egyptians believed these divine pairings maintained universal order and balance, or mat, and human marriages were expected to echo this sacred harmony on a smaller, mortal scale. In Egyptian society, marriage was seen as the natural and proper state of being for an adult. A man was encouraged to take a wife and establish a household as soon as he was able, as celibacy was considered abnormal. To be unmarried was to be incomplete, while arrangements were often practical, aimed at uniting families and securing property. There was a clear and celebrated appreciation for love, companionship, and affection. Unlike the starkly economic contracts of Sumer, Egyptian culture left behind a wealth of surprisingly tender and romantic love poetry. In texts written on papyrus scrolls, lovers speak of longing and admiration. One poem reads, "She has stolen my heart with a glance," while another describes a lover's voice as being sweeter than honey. While love may not have been a prerequisite for marriage, its presence was considered a great blessing, the ideal foundation for a stable and happy home. Remarkably for the ancient world, Egyptian women possessed significant legal rights within a marriage. They could own, manage, and inherit property independently from their husbands. A woman's property remained her own throughout the marriage, and she had the right to bequeath it to whomever she chose. She could also enter into legal contracts, sue in court, and crucially, initiate divorce proceedings if she had grounds to do so. Among the literate upper classes, marriage agreements were often formalized in written contracts. These documents clearly outlined the financial aspects of the union. They listed the property the wife brought into the marriage, which she retained, and stipulated the husband's duty to provide for her with an annual annuity of food, clothing, and oil. These contracts also protected the wife financially in the event of a divorce, often requiring the husband to pay a form of alimony. A unique feature of Egyptian royalty was the practice of incestuous marriage. Pharaohs frequently married their sisters or half-sisters, a custom that was shocking to outsiders like the Greeks. The rationale was purely religious, to emulate the gods, just as the divine siblings, Osiris and Isis, married to keep their power within the family. A pharaoh married his sister to preserve the purity of the sacred royal bloodline, ensuring the divinity of the next ruler. This practice, however, was largely confined to the ruling class. Despite the legal and religious weight given to marriage, the wedding ceremony itself was surprisingly simple. There was no grand state or religious service required. A couple was considered officially married the moment the bride moved her belongings into her husband's home. This act of cohabitation, celebrated with a family feast, was the only formality needed. The gods did not require elaborate fanfare to recognize a union. Ultimately, the primary purpose of an Egyptian marriage was procreation. Children were seen as a blessing from the gods and a practical necessity. Heirs were needed to inherit property, continue the family name, and, most importantly, perform the essential funerary rites that would guarantee their parents a peaceful afterlife. In this pursuit, lineage was essential, companionship was valued, and love was the divine gift that held it all together. If Sumerian marriage was a business transaction and Egyptian marriage a divine reflection, then Spartan marriage was a military operation. In the rigid, disciplined society of ancient Sparta, personal feelings were subordinate to the needs of the state. The primary purpose of marriage was not love, companionship, or economic alliance, but one single overarching goal: the production of strong, healthy Spartan warriors. The foundation for this unique approach was laid in childhood. At the age of 7, Spartan boys were removed from their families and thrust into the agoge, a brutal, state-sponsored training program designed to forge them into elite soldiers. At the same time, Spartan girls, unlike their cloistered counterparts in other Greek city-states, were also educated and trained physically. They learned to run, wrestle, and throw the javelin, not to fight in wars, but to develop strong bodies capable of bearing strong children. Marriage was therefore not a personal choice, but a civic duty, a form of state-mandated breeding. The laws attributed to the legendary figure, Lycurgus, even dictated the ideal ages for marriage: men around 30, women in their late teens, to ensure peak physical fitness for procreation. In Sparta, a weak child was not a family tragedy. It was a failure of duty to the state. Romance was an irrelevant variable in this cold, eugenic equation. The wedding ceremony itself was one of the most peculiar in the ancient world, a ritual steeped in secrecy and symbolism. On the wedding night, the bride's hair was cropped short. She was dressed in a man's cloak and sandals, and then left alone in a darkened room. This symbolic removal of her femininity prepared her for her role as the mother of future soldiers. The groom, who was still a soldier living in the communal barracks, would have to sneak away under the cover of darkness. He would enter the room, ritually capture his bride, and consummate the marriage before stealing away back to his barracks before sunrise. The marriage began not with a public celebration, but with a clandestine encounter, a secret shared between the two. This separation was not temporary, even after being married. A Spartan man continued to live, eat, and sleep with his fellow soldiers in the barracks until he reached the age of 30. He would visit his wife only at night, in secret. The family unit as we know it, a shared home, daily life together, did not exist for young Spartan couples. The man's primary loyalty was to his brothers in arms, not to his wife. The Spartan rationale behind this strange custom was that constant separation would keep desire and passion high. They believed that familiarity bred a softness and complacency that was dangerous to the warrior ethos. By making a man's time with his wife a rare and stolen pleasure, they hoped to maintain a vigor and intensity that would, in their view, produce more spirited and robust offspring. Despite these bizarre customs, Spartan women enjoyed a level of freedom and influence that was unheard of in the rest of the Greek world. They could inherit and own land. They were educated, and they were known for their sharp wit and assertive nature. While they did not fight, they were considered the guardians of Spartan values. famously telling their sons and husbands to come back with your shield, or on it. A stark reminder that in Sparta, honor and duty to the state were more important than life itself. We now journey to ancient India, where marriage was elevated from a social institution to a sacred duty, a spiritual path governed by the cosmic law of Dharma. Rooted in the ancient Vedic traditions, marriage, or vivaha, was considered one of the most important rites of passage, a sanskara that an individual would undertake. It was not merely a choice, but a profound responsibility owed to one's ancestors, family, and the gods. In this worldview, a marriage was never just a union of two people. It was a powerful and enduring bond between two families, two lineages, and sometimes two entire communities. The primary purpose was to ensure continuity, to uphold the social and moral order, and to allow the couple to enter the grihasta stage of life, the stage of the householder, dedicated to family and societal obligations. Marriages were almost exclusively arranged, with families taking great care to find a suitable match. A central element in this process was astrology. The horoscopes of the potential bride and groom were meticulously compared by learned astrologers to ensure their cosmic compatibility. It was believed that a union blessed by a harmonious alignment of the stars and planets would bring not only happiness to the couple, but also prosperity and good fortune to their extended families. The wedding ceremony itself was a complex and deeply symbolic affair, centered around Igni, the sacred fire, who served as the divine witness to the vows. The rituals could last for days, filled with prayers, offerings, and ancient chants, meant to sanctify the union and bless the couple with a long and prosperous life together. The most crucial part of the ceremony is the saptapadi, or the 7 steps. The bride and groom walk 7 steps together around the sacred fire, making a specific vow with each step. They pledge to nourish one another, to grow in strength together, to share their wealth, to be righteous, to raise strong and virtuous children, to live in harmony through all seasons, and finally, to remain lifelong friends and companions. The completion of the 7th step makes the marriage an irrevocable, spiritually bound union. Within the marriage, roles were clearly defined and seen as complementary. The wife was considered the heart of the household. She was responsible for managing domestic affairs, upholding the family's ritual purity, and participating in religious ceremonies alongside her husband. Her position, though often confined to the home, was seen as spiritually essential to the well-being of the family. The husband's duty was to protect his family, provide for their material needs, and lead them in the path of Dharma. While polygamy was known to exist, especially among royalty and the very wealthy, monogamy was held up as the spiritual ideal, a partnership of two souls working to fulfill their duties in this life. The bond was intended for life, and the concept of widowhood was fraught with difficulty. A widow was traditionally expected to lead a life of piety and austerity, while the later, infamous custom of sati, where a widow would immolate herself on her husband's funeral pyre, is often associated with India. It was a rare practice in the most ancient times, and was never a universally mandated part of the Vedic ideal of marriage. The focus was on the sanctity and endurance of the vows taken before the sacred fire. In ancient China, marriage was an institution built upon the bedrock of Confucian principles, family hierarchy, and an unwavering reverence for one's ancestors. This was not a private affair between two individuals in love. It was a solemn duty, a critical link in a chain that stretched from the distant past into the far future. To marry was to honor the dead, serve the living, and secure the family's place in the cosmic order. The paramount purpose of marriage was the continuation of the family line, the core Confucian value of filial piety, or shao, demanded that a son marry and produce male heirs. A son's duty was not just to his parents, but to all the generations that came before him. These heirs were essential for performing the ancestral rites, the offerings of food and incense that nourished the spirits of the dead. A failure to produce a male heir was a profound spiritual crisis, risking the wrath of neglected ancestors and bringing shame upon the entire household. Given these high stakes, the young couple themselves had no voice in the decision. Marriages were meticulously arranged by the heads of the families, typically through the services of a professional matchmaker. The matchmaker acted as a neutral intermediary, investigating the social standing, reputation, and wealth of both families. Compatibility was measured not by personal affection, but by the pragmatic alignment of family interests. Astrology and ritual were woven into every step of the process. The birth dates and times of the prospective bride and groom were carefully analyzed to ensure the match was auspicious. The entire engagement and wedding were governed by a complex code, known as the 6 Rites, a formal process that included the proposal, the exchange of names and astrological charts, the sending of betrothal gifts, and the selection of a favorable wedding date. This ritualized framework underscored the seriousness of the union. On the wedding day, the bride was dressed in vibrant red, the color symbolizing joy, luck, and prosperity. She would travel in a lavishly decorated, enclosed sedan chair from her parents' house to the groom's, a journey that represented her formal transfer from one family to another. She was expected to be silent and veiled, a symbol of demure modesty. The central act of the ceremony was the kowtow, or the 3 bows. First, the couple bowed to heaven and earth, acknowledging their place in the universe. Second, and most importantly, they bowed to the groom's ancestral tablets and to his parents, formally demonstrating their allegiance to his lineage. Only after honoring the cosmos and the family did they perform the third and final bow to each other. The sequence was a clear statement of priorities. Once married, the wife's life was forever changed. She left her own family behind to become a permanent member of her husband's household, where she was expected to be subservient to her new parents-in-law. Her primary duties were to manage domestic affairs, serve her husband's parents as if they were her own, and, above all, to bear sons who would continue the ancestral rites. The entire structure was deeply patriarchal. Divorce was a source of great shame and was rarely initiated. A husband could dismiss his wife for a number of reasons, laid out in classic texts, including failure to bear a son or disrespect to his parents. A wife, however, had no corresponding right to leave her husband. The marriage bond was forged to be permanent, a stable foundation upon which the all-important family line could be built for generations to come. Our journey now takes us to the archipelago of ancient Japan, where marriage customs were shaped not by a single rigid legal code, but by centuries of evolving traditions rooted in Shinto, the nation's indigenous spirituality. Shintoism teaches that divine spirits, mountains, trees, and people. A marriage, therefore, was seen as an act of creating harmony, an alignment of human life with the purity and order of the divine. Natural world, as in most ancient societies, Marriage was a practical affair, typically arranged by families to serve strategic ends. The goals were the consolidation of land, the forging of alliances between powerful clans, and most importantly, the continuation of the family line. Personal choice was secondary to the well-being and stability of the household and the community. However, in stark contrast to many of its continental neighbors, ancient Japanese society, particularly in its earlier periods, afforded women a relatively high degree of status and autonomy. Women could inherit and own property, manage estates, and often wielded significant influence within the family structure. This elevated status was reflected in some of their unique early marriage customs. One of the most notable of these was a practice known as mukwari, which translates to groom entering. In this matrilocal tradition, the husband would move into the bride's family home, either permanently or for a significant period. This custom highlighted the importance of the bride's lineage, with the groom essentially joining her established household. It was a clear demonstration of the power and centrality of the woman's family in the union. Over the centuries, however, particularly with the growing influence of Buddhist and Confucian thought from mainland Asia, this custom gradually gave way to yomari, or bride-entering. In this more familiar patriarchal system, the bride leaves her family to join the groom's household. This shift signaled a broader societal move towards a more patriarchal structure, aligning Japan more closely with its neighbors. The Shinto wedding ceremony itself is an act of purification and reverence. The central ritual, still practiced today, is the san kudo, meaning 339 times. The bride and groom take 3 sips of purified sake from 3 different sized cups, for a total of 9 sips. The number 3 is auspicious, and the ritual symbolizes the sealing of a sacred bond between the couple, their families, and the kami. There were no lengthy vows, but the symbolism spoke powerfully of unity and mutual respect. Early Japanese marriage customs were also marked by their flexibility. While monogamy was the norm for common people, polygamy was practiced among the nobility and warrior classes. Divorce, while not taken lightly, was also possible and often carried less social stigma than in other cultures. Incompatibility or a failure to produce heirs could be grounds for a discreet separation. Ultimately, the guiding principle in ancient Japanese marriage was the maintenance of social harmony and family honor. The union was less a strict legal contract and more a communal bond, blessed by the spirits and governed by a desire to live a life that was pure, balanced, and in accordance with the rhythms of the natural world. We now travel to the heart of a vast empire, to ancient Rome, where marriage was neither a mystical union nor a mere family arrangement, but a cornerstone of the state itself. For the Romans, marriage was a civic institution, deeply intertwined with law, social class, and public duty. It was a mechanism for forging alliances, transferring property, and producing legitimate Roman citizens, all under the watchful eye of the law and the absolute authority of the family patriarch, the paterfamilias. Roman law recognized 2 primary forms of marriage. The most ancient and traditional form was marriage cum manu, meaning with the hand. In this type of union, the wife passed from the legal control, or manus, of her father to that of her husband. Legally, she became like a daughter in her new family. Any property she owned or inherited became her husband's, and she was entirely subject to his authority. Over time, however, This strict form gave way to a more common and flexible arrangement: marriage, sine manu, or without the hand. Under this form, a wife legally remained a part of her own family, under the distant authority of her father. Crucially, this allowed her to own, inherit, and control her own property. This shift reflected the increasing economic power and social independence of women, particularly among Rome's elite classes. The wedding day was rich with symbolism. A Roman bride would wear a distinctive flame-colored veil, the flammeum, and her hair would be styled in 6 traditional locks. The central moment of the ceremony was the dextrorum iunctio, the joining of the couple's right hands, a gesture that symbolized harmony and a shared life. A procession would then lead the bride to her new home, where she was ritually welcomed with fire and water, the essential elements of a Roman household. For the Roman aristocracy, marriage was, above all, a political and strategic tool. Powerful families arranged marriages to cement political alliances, consolidate wealth, and end long-standing feuds. The personal feelings of the young couple were often a minor consideration when the future of a dynasty or the outcome of a senatorial race was at stake. Emperors themselves would arrange marriages for their relatives to secure loyalty and expand their influence. A Roman wife, or matrona, was expected to be a model of modesty, loyalty, and dignity. Her domain was the household, the domus, and she was responsible for its complex management, which included overseeing slaves, managing finances, and raising the children to be good Roman citizens. While her public life was limited, a respected matron wielded considerable power and influence within the home. Despite the formality of the institution, divorce in Rome was remarkably straightforward and socially acceptable. In a sine manu marriage, the union could often be dissolved by a simple declaration of intent from either the husband or wife. There was no need for a lengthy court process. The traditional wedding vow, ubi to Gaius, ego Gaia, where you are Gaius, I am Gaius, symbolized a lifelong partnership, but it was a partnership that could be ended with relative ease. Ultimately, the purpose of Roman marriage was to serve the state. It was a regulated, pragmatic institution designed to produce legitimate children who could inherit property and citizenship. Through these stable, legally defined family units, the social fabric of Rome was maintained, ensuring the power, prestige, and continuation of the Republic, and later, the Empire. We now turn our attention to the arid hills and fertile valleys of the ancient Near East, the world of the Hebrews. For them, marriage was not simply a civil contract or a family alliance. It was a sacred covenant, a relationship guided by divine law and imbued with profound religious significance. Rooted in the traditions of the Hebrew Bible, marriage was a cornerstone of spiritual life, a reflection of the enduring and sacred bond between the people of Israel and their God. The primary driver of marriage was the very first commandment given in the Torah: be fruitful and multiply. Procreation was not just a desire, but a religious obligation. As such, early marriage was the standard, and a life of celibacy was considered unnatural and incomplete. The continuation of the family line was essential for fulfilling God's covenant with Abraham, to make his descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. While love and companionship were cherished aspects of a marriage, the foundation of the institution was duty. First came duty to God, and second, duty to one's family and tribe. A proper marriage was essential for preserving religious and tribal identity, ensuring that property and inheritance rights were passed down correctly within the community, and maintaining the ritual and moral purity of the people. As was common in the ancient world, marriages were arranged by families. The negotiations often involved a bride price, known as a mohir, which was paid by the groom's family to the family of the bride. This was not a crude act of purchasing a wife, but rather a formal gesture of commitment. It compensated the bride's family for the loss of a daughter and served as proof that the groom possessed the financial means to support a new household. A key element of the Hebrew marriage was the ketubah, a formal, written marriage contract. This legal document was a significant form of protection for the wife. It detailed the husband's obligations to her, including the provision of food, clothing, and conjugal rights. Furthermore, it specified a financial settlement that the wife would receive in the event that she was divorced or widowed, ensuring she would not be left destitute. Although ancient Hebrew society was fundamentally patriarchal, women held a protected and honored position within the family structure. The ideal wife, described in the Book of Proverbs as the woman of valor, or Eshat Hale, is praised as being wise, industrious, and trustworthy. She is the strong and respected manager of the household, the foundation upon which the family is built. The practice of polygamy, specifically a man having more than one wife, existed in the time of the early patriarchs like Abraham and Jacob. However, over the centuries, the practice became less common, particularly after the Babylonian exile. Monogamy was increasingly upheld as the ideal form of marriage, a singular and devoted partnership. Divorce was permitted under biblical law but was generally discouraged. A man could issue his wife a written bill of divorce, known as a get. However, this was not a simple or casual act. The process was subject to religious and legal regulations to prevent it from being done on a whim, and to ensure that the wife's financial rights, as outlined in her ketubah, were fully honored. The covenant of marriage was to be entered into with reverence and dissolved only with great seriousness. We now move from the ordered civilizations of the Mediterranean and Near East to the misty forests and wind-swept hills of ancient Europe, the lands of the Celts. Here, marriage was not a rigid institution dictated by a centralized state, but a fluid and deeply communal bond, woven into the fabric of tribal law, seasonal rhythms, and a profound connection to the natural world. Celtic customs varied widely across the lands from Ireland to Gaul, but they shared common threads of partnership, honor, and flexibility. For the Celts, marriage was a sacred oath, often sworn in the presence of the tribe, its elders, and the Druids, who mediated between the human and spirit worlds. It was a union that honored the gods of the sky, the spirits of the earth, and the ancestors who had come before. The goal was to create a strong partnership that would benefit the entire clan through loyalty, prosperity, and of course, children. The structure of these unions could be surprisingly flexible. While monogamy was common, it was not uncommon for chieftains and powerful nobles to have multiple wives, often to secure alliances with other clans. These relationships were not haphazard, but governed by clear social customs, with each wife and her children holding a defined status within the household. Celtic women often possessed a remarkable degree of autonomy compared to their contemporaries in Rome or Greece. Surviving ancient Irish laws, the Brehon laws, show that women could own inherit, and control their own property. They were not passive participants in their marriage. They were partners with legal rights, including the ability to initiate divorce if they were mistreated or neglected. Perhaps the most distinctive feature of Celtic unions was the concept of the trial marriage, a custom often known as handfasting. This was an arrangement, typically lasting for a year and a day, where a couple could live together to determine if they were truly compatible. At the end of this trial period, they could either commit to a permanent union or simply part ways, free from any social stigma or legal penalty. This practice placed a unique emphasis on mutual consent and personal compatibility. Marriage ceremonies themselves were often tied to the cycles of nature. A popular time for weddings was the festival of Beltane, the fire festival held on the 1st of May to celebrate the beginning of summer and the return of life and fertility to the land. As part of the ritual, the couple might leap together over a bonfire, a symbolic act of purification that was believed to burn away any past misfortunes and bless their union with strength and passion. Formal marriage contracts did exist, particularly among the nobility, and these would detail the property and dowry each partner brought to the union. Celtic law was often concerned with mutual responsibility. Both husband and wife had defined obligations, and a failure by either party to uphold their side of the agreement could be grounds for the marriage's dissolution in a tribal court. Ultimately, a Celtic marriage was a vow that extended beyond the couple themselves. It was a promise made to the tribe, a bond with the land itself, and an agreement witnessed by the gods. The success of the union was seen as a contribution to the sacred balance that held the community and the natural world together in a delicate, interwoven harmony. Our historical journey now veers north, leaving behind the ancient world and its customs to land in the heart of medieval Europe. Here, on the flat, marshy plains of Poland, stands a monument of brick and iron, a fortress so vast it defies belief. This is Malbork Castle. But its story begins not in the cool forests of the Baltic, but in the searing heat and holy fervor of the Crusades. In the late 12th century, during the chaos of the Third Crusade, a group of German knights at the Siege of Acre in the Holy Land established a field hospital to care for their wounded and sick countrymen. This charitable brotherhood, initially focused on healing, soon transformed, following the path of the Templars and Hospitallers. They were recognized by the Pope as a formal military monastic order in 1198. The Order of Brothers of the German House of St. Mary in Jerusalem, known more simply as the Teutonic Knights. These were warrior monks, men bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, yet dedicated to defending and expanding the borders of Christendom with the sword. However, as the 13th century dawned, the Crusader project in the Holy Land was failing. Christian territories were shrinking, and the knights found their original purpose slipping away, filled with military zeal but lacking a battlefield. They sought a new mission. That mission arrived in the form of an invitation. In 1226, Conrad I, a Polish Duke of Masovia, was plagued by constant and brutal raids from the pagan Prussian tribes living to his north. Seeing an opportunity, he invited the Teutonic Knights to his lands, offering them territory in exchange for their help in subduing and converting the Prussians. It was a deal that would change the course of history in the region. The Knights accepted, but their ambitions stretched far beyond simply serving as mercenaries for a Polish duke. They astutely secured charters from both the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor, granting them not just the right to conquer the pagan lands, but to possess them as their own sovereign monastic state. The sword would not just spread the cross, it would carve out an empire. And so began the Northern Crusades, a long and brutal campaign to bring the Baltic region under their control, to solidify their rule and create a base for their operations. The knights began constructing a series of imposing brick fortresses. In 1274, on the strategic banks of the Nagat River, they laid the first foundations for a new castle that would serve as their headquarters. They named it Marienburg, or Mary's Castle, in honor of their patroness, the Virgin Mary, from its very inception. This was to be more than a simple fortress. It was a declaration in stone and brick, a symbol of their unshakable faith, their military might, and their intention to rule this new land forever. The warrior monks had found their new crusade, and Marienburg would become its formidable heart. By the turn of the 14th century, Malbork was evolving from a simple military sprawler outpost into a sprawling complex that was a direct reflection of the Teutonic Order's unique identity. It was a place where the austerity of a monastery coexisted with the grim readiness of a fortress, rising from the banks of the river. Its design was a masterclass in the Northern European style, known as brick Gothic, in an age dominated by grey stone. Malbork's powerful red walls were a statement of both innovation and intimidation. The Teutonic Knights were not just soldiers. They were a holy order, as such. They did not merely want a stronghold. They needed a sacred space where the rituals of war and worship could be performed side by side. This duality was meticulously engineered into the castle's layout, which was conceived as three distinct, self-contained sections: the High Castle, the Middle Castle, and the Lower Castle, each fortified and serving a specific purpose. The first and most important of these was the High Castle. This was the spiritual and residential core of the order, functioning as a fully equipped monastery. It was here that the Knight brothers lived their communal, disciplined lives. The architecture was designed to inspire piety and awe, with soaring vaulted ceilings that mimicked a cathedral's nave and tall, narrow windows that let in slivers of ethereal light, casting long shadows across the cold stone floors. Within the High Castle's formidable walls lay the chapter house, a grand hall where the order's leadership met to deliberate on matters of state, theology, and war. It also housed the Spartan dormitories, where the knights slept, and most importantly, the chapel of St. Mary. This sacred space was the heart of the fortress, a place for daily prayer and reflection, adorned with intricate tile mosaics and religious frescoes. Every architectural detail was imbued with meaning. The sheer height of the walls and towers was not just for defense. It symbolized a striving towards God. The careful interplay of light and shadow within its halls was meant to represent the struggle between divine truth and worldly chaos. The design was a sermon in brick, constantly reminding the warrior monks of their holy mission. Even the castle's more practical features were a source of pride and a symbol of the order's perceived superiority. Malbork possessed a sophisticated system of sanitation, with latrine towers cleverly constructed to drop waste directly into the flowing waters of the Nagat River. For the knights, this order and cleanliness stood in stark contrast to the pagan wilderness they believed they were called to tame. As the fortress grew, it became the undisputed nucleus of the Teutonic Order's burgeoning state. It was far more than a castle. It was an administrative capital, a holy site, and a military headquarters, all in one. It was a monastery, wrapped in battlements, faith clad in armor, and its most significant period of growth, as the 14th century unfolded. Malbork Castle transcended its role as a mere headquarters to become the magnificent capital of a burgeoning theocratic empire. In 1309, a pivotal decision was made. The Grand Master of the Teutonic Order relocated his office from Venice to Malbork. With this move, the castle was no longer a remote frontier command post. It was now the official heart of a sovereign and powerful state, ruled by war. From his opulent residence within the castle walls, the Grand Master governed with the combined authority of a king and a pope. Malbork became the political, economic, and spiritual nerve center for all the lands under the order's control. This new status necessitated a grand expansion of the castle complex. The middle castle was developed into a sprawling administrative hub, designed to impress visiting dignitaries and manage the vast workings of the state. This expansion included the construction of the Grand Master's Palace, a stunning example of late Gothic architecture that blended defensive features with residential luxury. A magnificent grand refectory was built, a vast hall where hundreds of knights and noble guests could be entertained in a style befitting a royal court. The middle castle also housed infirmaries, quarters for visiting knights, and the administrative offices from which the order's empire was managed. The Teutonic Order operated with remarkable efficiency, like a cross between a feudal kingdom and a modern corporation. From Malbork, they controlled the lucrative trade in grain and amber along the Vistula River, managed enormous agricultural estates, collected taxes, and minted their own currency. The castle's heavily fortified treasury held the immense wealth that funded their political and military ambitions. Malbork was also the primary logistical base for the ongoing Northern Crusade against the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which remained the last major pagan power in Europe. Its stables housed thousands of war horses. Knights from all across Christian Europe flocked to Malbork to join the Holy War, seeing it as a righteous and honorable endeavor. From the Order's perspective, they were a civilizing force, bringing order, Christianity, and German culture to a wild frontier. They founded dozens of towns, built roads and canals, and encouraged German artisans and farmers to settle the conquered lands. This entire colonization project was orchestrated from the grand halls of Malbork, but with great power came great enemies. The Kingdom of Poland, which had first invited the knights into the region, now viewed their powerful and expansionist neighbor with growing alarm and resentment. To the east, the Lithuanians fiercely resisted the Order's invasions, fighting bitterly to preserve their independence and their ancient faith. Still, from behind Malbork's impregnable walls, the Teutonic Knights seemed invincible. The castle stood at the zenith of its power, a symbol of faith and military might that dominated the political landscape of Northern Europe. It was the capital of a holy empire forged in steel and brick, but its very success was breeding the powerful enmities that would soon threaten its existence. At the dawn of the 15th century, the Teutonic Order, from its magnificent seat of power at Malbork, appeared to be an unstoppable force. Yet, the very success of their conquest had sown the seeds of their potential downfall. Their aggressive expansion and immense wealth had created powerful and deeply resentful enemies, most notably the kingdoms of Poland and Lithuania, who now saw the Order not as holy crusaders, but as dangerous and arrogant neighbors. A seismic political shift occurred in 1386 that would alter the balance of power in the region forever. The Grand Duke of Lithuania, Jogaila, made a strategic and historic decision. He converted to Christianity and married Jadwiga, the reigning queen of Poland. This act created the Polish-Lithuanian Union, a vast and formidable state that could finally challenge the Teutonic Knights on equal terms. Critically, with Lithuania's conversion, the last major pagan state in Europe had embraced Christianity. This single event completely eroded the Teutonic Order's primary justification for its existence. Their holy crusade against the pagans was now obsolete. Any further conflict would not be a holy war, but a nakedly political land dispute between competing Christian powers, a fact that did not go unnoticed in the courts of Europe. Tensions, which had simmered for decades in the form of border raids and diplomatic insults, finally boiled over into open war. The combined Polish-Lithuanian army, a massive and diverse force, mobilized with a single objective: to break the power of the Teutonic Order once and for all. The stage was set for one of the most significant and bloody confrontations of the Middle Ages. On July 15th, 1410, the two armies met on the fields near the villages of Grunwald and Tannenberg. The Teutonic Knights, clad in their signature white mantles with the black cross, were a formidable sight. They were heavily armored, supremely confident, and considered by many to be the finest warriors in Christendom. But they were outnumbered and facing a determined and well-led enemy. The battle was a cataclysm. The Teutonic Knights fought with their customary discipline and ferocity, but they were ultimately outmaneuvered by the Polish-Lithuanian tactics. The fighting raged for hours, but the result was a devastating and unambiguous defeat for the Order. Their army was shattered. Thousands of knights were killed or captured, and their Grand Master, Ulrich von Jungingen, fell on the battlefield. The myth of the Teutonic Order's invincibility was destroyed in a single afternoon. The news sent shockwaves across their territories, but the victorious Polish-Lithuanian army did not pause to celebrate. They immediately turned and marched on the source of the Order's power, its administrative and spiritual heart, the castle of Malbork itself. As the remnants of the Order's defeated army scrambled back to safety, the defenders within Malbork prepared for the inevitable siege. A new, resourceful Grand Master, Heinrich von Plauen, took command, rallying his men for a desperate last stand. The castle's field army was gone, but its walls were high, its moats were deep, and its defenders were determined. Malbork, the greatest fortress in the Crusader state, now faced its ultimate test. The victorious Polish-Lithuanian army arrived at the gates of Malbork, expecting a swift and final victory. The Order's legendary field army had been annihilated at Grunwald, surely its capital, now filled with a skeleton crew of survivors and mercenaries, would quickly fall. But they had underestimated both the fortress and the man now in command of it. Malbork was an architectural masterpiece of defense. Its immense, multi-layered brick walls were designed to withstand a prolonged assault. Deep moats, fed by the waters of the Nagat River, surrounded the complex. Its three castles, high, middle, and lower, functioned as independent strongholds, meaning that even if one section fell, the others could continue to fight. Furthermore, its granaries and storehouses were filled with enough food and supplies to endure a siege for many months. The defense was commanded by the new Grand Master, Heinrich von Plauen, a cunning and determined strategist. who had not been present at the disastrous Battle of Grunwald. He organized the castle's defense with ruthless efficiency. He rallied the few surviving knight brothers and bolstered their numbers with hired mercenaries, preparing every bastion and battlement for the coming storm. The siege began. For 2 months, the Polish-Lithuanian army battered the castle. Their siege engines hurled massive stones against the ramparts, and their early cannons attempted to punch through the brick. But Malbork's walls held firm, absorbing the punishment from the battlements. The defenders rained down a constant volley of arrows and crossbow bolts, inflicting steady casualties on the attackers below. The siege quickly devolved into a grim war of attrition. The besiegers, camped in the open fields, began to suffer. Their long supply lines were vulnerable to disruption. Disease, the constant scourge of medieval armies, began to spread through their camp. Morale plummeted as the weeks dragged on with no sign of a breach. The massive fortress seemed to mock their efforts, a silent, defiant giant of red brick. Ultimately, the logistical and political realities became undeniable for the Polish-Lithuanian king. His army was weary, his mercenaries were demanding pay, and the long campaign season was drawing to a close. With winter approaching, he could not afford to keep his massive force in the field. Reluctantly, the decision was made to abandon the siege. The attackers dismantled their camps, packed up their siege engines, and began the long march home. Malbork had survived. Its walls had not been breached. The order, though horrifically wounded, had held its capital and avoided total annihilation. Heinrich von Plauen's determined defense had saved the Teutonic state from immediate collapse. But it was a hollow victory. The order had won the siege but lost the war. Their lands were devastated, their treasury was empty, and their military reputation was in tatters. The Battle of Grunwald had inflicted a mortal wound from which they would never fully recover. While Malbork's great walls had proven their strength, the powerful crusading empire they were built to protect had begun an irreversible decline. Though Malbork's walls had stood defiant against the great siege of 1410, the victory had been a Pyrrhic one. The Teutonic order was never the same. The decades that followed were not a period of recovery, but of a slow, grinding decline. The once mighty crusading state found itself crippled by debt, internal dissent, and the permanent loss of its military supremacy. The primary affliction was economic. The peace treaty that followed the Battle of Grunwald had imposed staggering war reparations on the order to pay this immense debt to Poland and Lithuania and to fund the rebuilding of their shattered armies. The knights levied crushing taxes upon the city's merchants and nobles who lived in their territories. What was once a relationship of protection and governance became one of financial extraction. This policy bred deep and widespread resentment. The German-speaking townspeople and landowners, the very people the order's state was built upon, began to see the knights not as their protectors, but as their oppressors. In 1440, this discontent was formalized. A powerful group of nobles and cities joined together to create the Prussian Confederation, an alliance whose sole purpose was to resist the order's increasingly autocratic and financially ruinous rule. For over a decade, a tense political struggle ensued. Finally, in 1454, the Prussian Confederation took a revolutionary step. They formally renounced their allegiance to the Teutonic Order and sent a delegation to the King of Poland, Casimir IV, asking him to annex their lands and accept them as his subjects. The Polish king agreed. triggering the final fatal conflict, the 13 Years' War. This was a brutal and destructive war, fought not on a distant pagan frontier, but within the heartland of the Order's state. Malbork was once again the center of the conflict, the main stronghold of a beleaguered order fighting against its own rebellious subjects and the full might of the Polish crown. The fortress held out, but the war was slowly being lost around it. The final blow came not from a catapult or a cannon, but from the Order's own empty treasury. Unable to pay the large garrison of Bohemian mercenaries they had hired to defend Malbork, the knights lost control of their own fortress. These pragmatic, unpaid soldiers held the keys to the castle, and they wanted their money. Seeing that the bankrupt order could not pay them, the mercenaries made a business decision. In 1457, they entered into negotiations with the Polish king for the sum of 190,000 florins. The mercenaries agreed to hand over the castle, and so the greatest fortress in Christendom fell not to a dramatic assault, but to a simple transaction. The Polish forces didn't storm the walls. They walked through the gates after their payment was delivered. The Teutonic Knights, humiliated, retreated to a smaller castle in Kingsburg. Malbork, for centuries the symbol of their unshakable power, was now a royal residence of the Polish monarchy. The age of the warrior monks was over, brought to an end not by a holy war, but by economics and a well-timed betrayal. With the departure of the Teutonic Knights in 1457, Malbork Castle entered a new and distinct chapter in its long history. No longer the capital of a militant monastic order, it was now a prized possession of the Polish monarchy. The fortress, acquired by payment rather than by bloody conquest, became a powerful symbol of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth's ascendancy in the region. King Casimir IV and his successors recognized Malbork not only for its immense strategic value, but also for its grandeur. It was incorporated into the network of royal residences, a magnificent northern outpost for the Polish kings. The castle's grim, monastic austerity began to soften, giving way to the more colorful and vibrant life of a royal court. The transformation was both functional and aesthetic. The vast, echoing halls that once hosted solemn chapter meetings of the knights were now adorned with rich tapestries and the banners of Polish royalty. Grand receptions for visiting ambassadors and lavish royal balls replaced the Spartan meals of the warrior monks. The Grand Master's palace was repurposed to serve as a luxurious, temporary home for the king and his retinue during their visits. Administratively, Malbork became a key center for the governance of the province of Royal Prussia, which now enjoyed a degree of autonomy under the Polish crown. The castle's officials no longer planned crusades. They oversaw regional affairs, collected royal taxes, and monitored the vital trade routes that brought wealth to the kingdom. Yet, its military importance was not forgotten. Malbork remained a crucial fortress for the defense of Poland's northern borders. Recognizing the changing nature of warfare, the Polish crown undertook significant efforts to modernize its defenses. The medieval walls, built to withstand catapults and arrows, were reinforced and adapted to face the growing threat of cannon fire. New earthen bastions and artillery platforms were integrated into the existing Gothic structure, creating a hybrid fortress that blended centuries of military architecture. Despite its prestige, Malbork was never the primary seat of the Polish monarchy. The royal court was officially based in, and later, in Warsaw. The kings would typically visit Malbork only periodically, using it as a base of operations for overseeing their Prussian territories or for hosting important diplomatic events. Its life as a royal court was often seasonal and ceremonial. For nearly 2 centuries, the castle enjoyed a period of relative stability and prestige. It had successfully transitioned from a crusader's bastion to a king's palace. Its purpose had shifted from conquest to governance, from monastic discipline to courtly ceremony. The great brick walls, once silent witnesses to the prayers and battle plans of the Teutonic Order, now stood guard over a new era of Polish power and influence. By the early 17th century, the long era of peace that Malbork had enjoyed under Polish rule was drawing to a close. A formidable new power had risen in the north, the Swedish Empire, driven by ambitious kings and a highly disciplined modern army. Sweden sought to achieve dominium, Maris Beltici, total control over the Baltic Sea. The sprawling Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, with its valuable ports and coastline, stood directly in their way. The series of brutal conflicts that followed, known as the Polish-Swedish Wars, would once again place Malbork on the front lines. These wars were driven by a complex mix of dynastic rivalries, religious tensions, and a raw struggle for economic and territorial supremacy. The castle, with its strategic command of the Nogat River and the surrounding fertile lands, was a prime military objective. In the 1620s, and again more devastatingly in the 1650s, Swedish forces invaded Royal Prussia. Their armies, renowned for their professionalism and effective use of mobile artillery, swept through the region, capturing city after city. Though Malbork had been modernized, it was now facing a type of warfare that its original designers could have never conceived. The sheer power of 17th-century cannon fire could now threaten to breach even its famously thick walls. The most catastrophic of these invasions began in 1655, a period so traumatic in Polish history that it is known simply as the Deluge. The Swedish army poured into the Commonwealth, which was already weakened by other conflicts and internal strife. In 1656, after a short siege, the unthinkable happened. Malbork Castle fell. The surrender was not the result of a glorious hard-fought battle, but of an exhausted and poorly supplied garrison being overwhelmed by a superior force. Once again, Malbork found itself under foreign occupation. The Swedish forces treated the castle not as a historic monument, but as a treasure chest to be plundered. For several years, its vast riches were systematically looted. Priceless works of art, religious artifacts, tapestries, and entire sections of the royal archives were packed into crates and shipped to Stockholm. The castle was stripped of the splendor it had accumulated over centuries. For the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the loss of Malbork was a devastating blow, both militarily and psychologically. The fortress had stood for 2 centuries as a symbol of their victory over the Teutonic Order. Now, it was just another casualty in a war that threatened to erase Poland from the map entirely. Poland would eventually rally and, after a long and bloody struggle, regain control of the castle. But the damage had been done. Malbork was returned as a scarred and empty shell of its former self. Its role as a prestigious royal residence was effectively over, its halls now echoing with the memory of occupation. War had returned to the great fortress, and while it had endured, it had not emerged unscathed. The 18th century saw Malbork Castle, once the epicenter of a crusading empire and a proud seat of Polish kings, fade into a long and quiet obscurity. The devastating wars of the previous century had stripped it of its treasures and its prestige. In an age of rapidly modernizing armies and shifting political borders, the great medieval fortress was increasingly seen as an expensive, obsolete relic. This period of neglect mirrored the fate of the nation it belonged to. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, once a dominant power in Eastern Europe, was now in a state of terminal decline, paralyzed by internal political strife and vulnerable to the ambitions of its powerful neighbors, Russia, Austria, and the rising Kingdom of Prussia. In 1772, this decline culminated in the First Partition of Poland, an act in which the three neighboring powers annexed large portions of the Commonwealth's territory. Malbork, along with the entire region of Royal Prussia, was absorbed into the expanding Kingdom of Prussia, ruled by Frederick the Great. For the castle, it was another transfer of ownership, but this time it came with a profound loss of status. The new Prussian authorities had little interest in the castle's grand history. They saw not a monument to be preserved, but a massive, conveniently located structure to be put to mundane, practical use. Its days as a royal residence or a symbol of conquest were over. Malbork was to become a functional part of the Prussian military machine. The castle was converted into a massive barracks and a supply depot. The magnificent Grand Refectory, which had once hosted kings and crusaders, was repurposed as an army drill hall. The sacred chapel of St. Mary, the spiritual heart of the Teutonic Order, was desecrated and turned into a warehouse for storing grain and munitions. Its soaring Gothic halls were subdivided with crude walls, and its ornate windows were bricked up. The damage was not just functional, but structural, to create more space or acquire building materials. Sections of the castle were unceremoniously dismantled. Priceless medieval bricks, fired 7 centuries earlier, were carted away to be used in the construction of new, nondescript administrative buildings. The great fortress was being slowly cannibalized, its history erased one brick at a time. For decades, Malbork languished in this state of neglect. It was no longer celebrated or feared. It was simply used. To the soldiers garrisoned within its walls and the townspeople who lived in its shadow, it was little more than a decaying, oversized barracks, its glorious past all but forgotten beneath layers of dust, indifference, and utilitarian grime. Yet, even in its deepest state of decay, the sheer, haunting majesty of the castle could not be entirely extinguished. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, a new intellectual and artistic movement was stirring. The Romantics, with their fascination for the medieval past, began to see the crumbling towers of Malbork not as a sign of failure, but as a sublime and tragic monument to a lost age of chivalry. The long sleep was ending, and the castle was about to be rediscovered. The long, quiet sleep of Malbork Castle was finally broken in the 19th century by a powerful new force, Romantic nationalism. As the German states moved towards unification, they sought symbols from the past to build a common identity. The colossal brick fortress of Marienburg, as they called it, was rediscovered and recast as a sublime monument to the glory of the Teutonic Knights and a romanticized medieval German spirit. This newfound reverence sparked one of the most ambitious restoration projects in European history, beginning in the early 1800s and continuing for over a century. Prussian architects, historians, and craftsmen undertook the monumental task of raising the castle from its state of decay, brick by brick. They rebuilt collapsed walls, revaulted ceilings, and painstakingly recreated the ornate interiors. Though their work was sometimes guided more by a 19th century ideal of chivalry than by strict historical accuracy, the effort was a masterpiece of conservation for its time. The restored Malbork became a celebrated national monument of the German Empire. It was depicted in paintings, studied by scholars, and visited by emperors. No longer a forgotten barracks, it was now a museum, a powerful icon of Teutonic strength and heritage, and a pilgrimage site for a nation forging its modern identity by looking to its medieval past. But the turbulent tides of the 20th century would bring war to the castle's gates once more. After the devastation of World War I, the region became contested territory. During World War II, the castle was tragically drawn back into its original role as a fortress, used as a stronghold by the defending German army. In the brutal fighting of early 1945, as the Soviet Red Army advanced, Malbork was subjected to weeks of heavy artillery bombardment. The destruction was catastrophic. Fires raged through the historic interiors, gutting the Grand Master's palace and the great refectory. Roofs collapsed, walls crumbled, and entire sections of the castle were reduced to rubble by the end of the war. More than half of the magnificent fortress lay in ruins, a smoldering, silent casualty of a modern conflict. In the aftermath of the war, the borders of Europe were redrawn. Malbork, and the land it stood on, became part of a reborn Poland. The castle's identity was transformed yet again, no longer a symbol of German nationalism. It was embraced by Poland as a precious piece of its own complex history, a monument not of conquest, but of endurance. The Polish people then began the second great restoration of Malbork, in an extraordinary effort that continues to this day. Polish conservators, architects, and historians have meticulously rebuilt the castle from its ashes. This modern restoration, guided by a deep commitment to historical authenticity, has been a monumental achievement, a testament to a nation's dedication to preserving a shared world heritage. Today, Malbork Castle stands complete once more, the largest brick fortress in the world, and a designated UNESCO World Heritage Site. Its great walls no longer echo with the sounds of battle or the politics of empires. Instead, they resonate with the quiet footsteps of visitors from around the globe who come to marvel at its scale and to touch its long and layered history. Malbork no longer defends a border, it remembers one. It stands as a silent, powerful testament to nearly 8 centuries of conflict, culture, and finally, peace. Our journey through the corridors of time ends here, within the quiet strength of these restored brick walls. If you have enjoyed this exploration of the past and found a measure of tranquility in its stories, please consider showing your support by liking this video and subscribing to Medieval Nocturnes. It is your quiet appreciation that allows these histories to be told. Now, as our story concludes, may your mind be calm and your rest be deep. Good night.